Hi, this is Noel McCardle from The Fluff is Raging, and I wanted to talk about television because we're coming up to the end of the year, and it's the kind of time of the year when everyone kind of looks back at the good and the bad. Uh, we were quite lucky, I think, this year in terms of quite a lot of really quite good television series were made, and of course, it's a truism that we're living in the golden age of television, and so sometimes expectations can be a little too high, uh, which I think might have been the case with True Detective. Um, Certainly, there was a very interesting article just after the final episode aired, talking. I think it was in the New Yorker, but I don't quote me on that. Talking about the fact that if we have like episode recap culture, which we live in, where basically every episode of television, is recapped and reviewed, within minutes of it being on TV, that inevitably, series suffer in terms of criticism because if they're overly praised in their early episodes, as True Detective certainly was, can the show itself live up to audience expectation? And the final episode of True Detective, which I thought was just brilliant, for some, had problems, and I do think it had some problems with it. I think principally the main problem with True Detective is that it set up this very very interesting scenario involving this horrific set of serial killings, and the identity of the killer remained a mystery until really the final episode. And by that point, we were so invested in finding out who this person is, and more importantly, why he was doing the things that he was doing. It was something of a letdown. I mean, although the portrayal was wonderful, and the kind of uh, the setting that they picked for him and his bizarre half sister was just perfect, and more in keeping, definitely in keeping with the kind of mood and tone of the whole series. I felt that although the final episode was very good, well, I said brilliant, okay, it was very good. That I kind of wished we had maybe had a little more time with the killer, so that we could actually sort of see exactly, you know, what his motivations were. Um, Now that's really a minor quibble because, of course, the actual investigation of the actual crime itself was far less important than the actual focus of what it did to the Woody Harrelson and the McConaughey characters. And of course, really, the show is an exploration of their own kind of moral failings. I think the show was, though, overpraised. I think the show was fantastic, but I don't quite know if it was just as fantastic as everyone thinks it was. I do think it was a teeny bit overpraised, but the performances all around were superb. So I would definitely put that film in my, one of my top 10 TV series of the year, without question. Without question, I would do that. But another TV series, very, very different kind of series, very different tone, very different ideas, and totally different sort of style. And one that was airing over the summer on the BBC, and it later aired here in Canada. Just finished, I think it's just finished airing on the CBC. Was The Honourable Woman with Maggie Gyllenhaal, and she is superb in this series. So if you have not seen it, if you missed it, go looking for it. It's well worth seeing. It was 7 or 8 episodes, a very complex drama set in London, and set mostly in London, with a superb central performance by Maggie Gyllenhaal, and also Stephen Ray popped up in it, and a few other actors who I actually recognize, from various kind of British dramas. Um, One of which, actually several of which, had appeared in a very excellent drama that I actually missed when it came on TV a couple of years ago. I just caught up with it a while ago, called The Shadow Line, which was made by the same guy who made The Honourable Woman. His name is Hugo Blix, and The Shadow Line, also has Stephen Ray and a few other actors who show up in The Honourable Woman, and they're both series are good complex conspiracy thrillers, with a lot of a lot of character, and it's really TV for grown-ups. Um, and and I think that the comparison between True Detective and The Honourable Woman, they do bear comparing, although they're two very, very different shows. They do bear comparing in terms of how we feel about our expectations regarding the supposed golden age of television. We now live in an age where basically we expect television drama to have production design and costume design and general production value as good, or in some cases better, than what we expect when we go to the movies. And both shows certainly had that. The BBC drama, I mean, as expensive as I'm sure it was to make, will always suffer because British drama in general has an uphill battle in terms of getting large budgets. They just don't have the same budgets that American shows have. True Detective had superb production value. I'll be very curious to see the second season of it when it finally airs on HBO next year. Not the least of which to see will it live up to the expectations that everyone's going to have on it. The setting has been switched from Louisiana to California, so we'll be curious to see if it'll still retain the same kind of cachet that it had with audiences as the first season did. But in terms of like how True Detective and The Honourable Woman are, can be held up as examples of quality made, quality acted, and quality directed, and quality written drama, there's no question that I think one of the fantastic things about both shows, and I think that it's an example that other shows need to look to, is that both shows had one director for the entire show. So the look of each episode was consistent. And that is something that is sometimes not the case, or actually very often not the case with television dramas. And it certainly helped, I think, in the case of True Detective, that Kerry Fukunaga, I think his name is, who has a very distinctive eye, made Louisiana look the way it looks in the show. And I'll be very curious to see when they go to the second season, because they've opted to, probably as you know, they've opted to have different directors for different episodes. So we'll see, will the look and feel and tone of the actual second season be radically different from the look and feel and tone of the first season. Two other series this year that need to be mentioned, of course, are Breaking Bad and Boardwalk Empire, both of which finished their runs. Now, both of these series, for me, I was playing catch up with both of them. I had never seen Breaking Bad, had always heard about it, and I just somehow always missed it. And I was aware that I was missing a huge part of something by not having seen it. But I managed to get the DVDs of all 5 seasons, or 6 seasons, I guess it is, and I binge watched them all. So I now know an awful lot about chemistry, far more than I ever did in school. And Breaking Bad, I think the final season of Breaking Bad was superb. I won't give any spoilers away because I'm sure there are people who actually haven't seen it yet. Well worth seeing. I do still think, though, that the actual season, the 2 seasons involving Giancarlo Esposito's character and the Jonathan Banks character were the best. But it's certainly, the series had a very satisfying ending. And I know that the aim of the show basically was to take, Mr. Chips and turn him into Scarface. That's a quote from the actual show's producers. And it more than did that, as you well know. I won't even go on about the show here because, there's a million places on the web you can find stuff about Breaking Bad. I have to say that never having sort of seen it, and I was catching up on it, it did actually fulfill what I expected. It lived up to all my expectations, and all my friends had said, you have to see it. It's very, very good. Likewise, Boardwalk Empire, which I'd only seen, 1 or 2 episodes of, and again, I got the DVDs and I binged on them. And it had, again, standout episodes and standout seasons and some standout acting from all of the cast. I also never imagined I would watch an American television series that would actually mention Barry's tea, but it did. Um, and Steve Buscemi, rightly deserves all the praise that he gets. I think both Buscemi and Bryan Cranston from Breaking Bad, deserve all the praise that the two of them get in terms of their acting on television. Now, another show worth mentioning, and this is almost a painful thing for me to say, because I think Mad Men jumped the shark. I think Mad Men jumped the shark in the early stages of season 6. I think that Mad Men season 5 was by far the best season of the whole series. And I have a feeling that Mad Men's basically running out of things to say. And of course, the final 7 or 8 episodes are going to air next year. They've already been filmed. And so they showed 6 or 7 episodes this year. The final episode that they showed, which coincided with the moon launch, or the moon landing, that was the actual historical event that was sort of coinciding with the events of the actual episode, was a wonderful way to end a certain character's storyline on the show, and I won't say who. But overall, I think Mad Men has continued to be. I mean, it's well written. It's got some extremely fantastic actors and a great cast, and of course, fantastic production design and costume design. But I think that the show has, in many ways, it has sort of set out to do what it set out to do, and now it's basically the guy who's at the party who just doesn't know when to leave. So I am glad that the show is ending. I think all television series, have to end at some point, and some shows just don't know when to stop. I think Boardwalk Empire got the number right, 5 seasons, and I think Breaking Bad got the number right with 5 or 6 seasons that it had. I think Mad Men, as I say, I think season 5, which if you recall, if you've seen Mad Men, and if you haven't seen Mad Men, please cover your ears. Season 5, which ended with the suicide of one of the characters, of the Jared Harris character, was by far the show's best season and most interesting season. And it's now the case that the Don Draper, the mystery of who Don Draper is no longer a mystery to anybody. Like, it's no longer a mystery to the audience, but it's no longer a mystery to sort of like half the characters that he's actually encountering. So if you take away that aspect of the show, who is this man? Who is this hollow man? Hiding behind the veneer of a successful Madison Avenue ad man. If you take away that aspect of the show, then you're left with a lot of kind of sporadic other stuff. I also don't understand why Mad Men has chose to, get rid of certain characters, only then to turn around and bring in new characters and new situations and new settings without really fully developing who they were. So as I say, I adore Mad Men, and I heartily recommend that everyone watches Mad Men. But as I say, I am glad that Mad Men's coming to an end. I very much enjoyed the episodes that were on this year, particularly, as I say, the final episode, the moon landing one. But I'll be curious to see how they're going to end the entire series. I mean, of course, there's all kinds of speculation that the actual series will end with the death of Don Draper, which of course has been hinted from the very beginning by the actual title sequence of the show itself. And I do think that the show will end with the death of Don Draper. In terms of the actual persona of Don Draper will go, and in his place will be Dick, who he actually really is. I think that character will stay, and his persona will finally die. That's how I think the show is going to end. I don't really think. Well, of course, I could be wrong. I mean, it might just be his physical death, but I suspect it will basically be, the death of his persona. So, yeah, Breaking Bad, Boardwalk Empire, The Honourable Woman, True Detective, Mad Men. I mean, these are all fantastic series and well worth checking out. And if you haven't seen them, go and look for them. Because if you haven't seen them, I'm guessing you're probably, wondering what all your friends are talking about. I also got caught up on The Walking Dead over the summer. Again, having sort of skipped on it. I'm not really a zombie person, and I wrote about this on the blog as well. I'm not really a zombie person, but I did binge watch many episodes. The Walking Dead is ludicrous, obviously, and it's also in many cases quite bad, with really kind of cardboard characters and kind of very soap opera situations. However, the last several episodes, like for the current season, have been superb. And I think basically the show, after many years of going down, blind alleys, has finally found its core rhythm again, which is basically to keep its characters on the move and to sort of like have them in permanent peril. Because I think that's the only way that you can actually treat, this kind of weird post-apocalyptic zombie scenario. So yeah, The Walking Dead. By the time you see this podcast, The Walking Dead mid-season winter finale will actually have been on, and we will have to wait now till next spring for new episodes. But so far, The Walking Dead has been very, very good this season, and there are some characters in it that I'm actually glad have disappeared have been killed off. Some actors, have sort of like left the series, because as I say, some of the kind of characters are kind of cardboard stock characters, and there's cardboard stock soap opera writing. A show that is anything but cardboard stock characters that was airing over the summer on Cinemax in the States and HBO Canada here in Canada, and it was on Sky in the UK, is the Knick. And this gets back to something I was just mentioning about, single directors. Steven Soderbergh directed every single episode of the Knick, and it shows. It's extremely smartly written. The Knick basically is set in early 1900s in New York, and it's about the early days of modern surgery. And it is a very clear example to me of how you can do a period drama, and Boardwalk Empire did this as well. How you can do a period drama and not be heavy-handed with bizarre historical references. I mean, all the historical references that are in it, are very subtly done and very interestingly done. It's never less than engaging. It had one season with 10 episodes, I think. They have ordered a second season of it. I'll be very, very curious to see how they go with it. If you haven't seen the Knick, go and find the Knick somewhere. It'll be on DVD eventually, I'm sure. Clive Owen is in it, and he's always good, and he's very, very good in this. And it's about, he's a surgeon, but he's also a cocaine addict, and it's about racism, and it's about the role of women in society in the early 1900s, and it's about how hospitals administered themselves, and it's about views about immigration into New York in the early 1900s. It's got a lot of stuff going on in it. It looks incredible. Soderbergh, of course, is renowned for basically working very, very fast, and I'm glad Soderbergh keeps on saying I'm going to retire, and then he doesn't. And so I'm glad he, has opted out of retirement to make this instead of another Ocean's movie, which are, overrated. But yeah, definitely it is well worth seeing. And I wrote a big piece on the blog about how much I actually admired the Knick. And it is definitely worth having a look at. Although it does have some dodgy elements for me as an Irish viewer. There are Irish characters in it, none of whom are played by Irish actors. And fake Irish accents are something that we actually try to that we're always kind of on the lookout for. There is actually an Irish actress in it, but she's not playing an Irish person, and that's Eve Hewson, who just happens to be Bono's daughter, and she's wonderful. And she's playing a character from like North or South Carolina or someplace like that. I have no idea if her accent is genuine or not, or if people like from the South, when they hear her, are covering their ears. But she's very good in the series, and so the Knick is definitely well worth finding and looking for. And if you get the chance, make sure you watch it before the second season comes on next year. So, all these great television shows give proof to me that we actually are living in the golden age of television. But then again, there are some shows that are just appalling and should just die a slow death, or even die a fast death and get off the air quickly. And I'm thinking specifically of The Big Bang Theory, which has overstayed its welcome as far as I'm concerned, but is making so much money for CBS and for all the people involved in making it. It's not going away for another couple of years at least. CBS, in fact, has actually ordered, I think, 3 more years of it. And of course, the stars of it earn massive amounts of money per episode. It's not going anywhere. I've watched every episode this current season, and I haven't laughed once. Like I've smirked as opposed to laughed. And I've watched, I've binge watched other seasons of it, and I always found them very enjoyable and very, very funny, and some of the interactions within the cast very, very interesting and well done and enjoyable. But that it really seems to be basically, even given with the fact it's a sitcom, which thrives in the idea of the same thing over and over and over again, it's just too much at this point, and it's no longer funny, I'm afraid. And it's a shame to say that, because although the show was always kind of obvious, it was always very enjoyable. So that's the one show for me in terms of a comedy that needs to go. But in terms of dramas that I saw this year, in terms of like event television, or in terms of golden age of television, or whatever you want to call it, I would put my favorite shows of the year in the following order. Okay, I think number 1 is The Knick, for sure. Followed very closely by The Honourable Woman. Followed very closely by the final season of Breaking Bad. Followed very closely by the final season of Boardwalk Empire. And then after that, True Detective. One more show that I'm going to mention, and this is actually not, season 2 was on this year. Season 1, I had to go and sort of catch up on before I watched season 2, is a TV series out of Britain called Utopia. Now, I'm going to mention this only because it's about to get remade by HBO by none other than David Fincher. Now, Utopia is a extremely smartly written, ludicrous, and very clever, and very funny, and quite violent conspiracy thriller set in Britain. And I won't say what it involves, because the actual reveal of the main conspiracy is so well done that I have no wish to spoil it here. It has a look all onto itself. So season 1, which was 6 episodes, was superb. Season 2 showed a very, it wasn't very good. It wasn't anywhere near as engaging as the first season. That said, the first episode of the second season, which was basically like a giant flashback that kind of set the ground rules for the entire series conspiracy, The first episode, that first hour, which aired on Channel 4 um, in the early spring, that first hour is one of the best hours of television I've seen in a very, very long time. Now, Utopia basically had 2 seasons in Britain. Channel 4 chose then not to renew it, so it's over because it did not get the ratings that they wanted for it. And I'm mentioning it because I do think you should go and look for it. Season 1 particularly, season 1. Actually, go and look at season 1, and then look at episode 1 of season 2. After that, you can stop watching it. But I'll be very curious to see what Fincher does with it. The actual screenplay is being adapted, the teleplay is being adapted by Gillian Flynn from who wrote Gone Girl, and I don't really understand why Fincher wants to do a remake of this. Fincher doesn't have a good track record when it comes to remakes. All you have to do is look at what he did with The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. But I'm pretty sure he must have been attracted to this series because of its look and kind of very stylized violence. And I imagine if he chooses to direct an episode or all the episodes of the HBO adaptation, it will look very cool. I just don't know that it's going to have the same sort of oomph that the original series had. The original Channel 4 series, I think, worked for many reasons, not the least of which, of course, the fact that the cast, with a couple of exceptions, the cast were, not exactly famous, moderately interesting, recognizable English TV actors, but not exactly super famous. And the other thing I think that the great strength about the show is the fact that the cast of characters, the actual actors, are very ordinary looking, and they're by no means like Hollywood beautiful at all. And I have a funny feeling that when HBO decides to make the American version of it, that will not be the case at all. So I do urge you to watch The Knick. As I say, it's my #1 show for the year. And I do urge you, if you can go and find it, to watch season 1 of Utopia, which was on, I think, a couple of years ago on Channel 4, and then the first episode of the second season. Other than that, well, we'll wait and see what else is coming up down the pipeline. I'll be back here soon enough, prattling on about something else. You can follow me on Twitter at RagingFluff, or the blog ragingfluff.wordpress.com. All right, Merry Christmas.